pain medicines.
And improve quality of life. That's why we recommend.
Hello, I'm Melissa Rayberger. Breaking this morning, we're just seconds away from a historic return to the moon that could pave the way for a mission to Mars. We have team coverage on the ground at Kennedy Space Center for the Artemis 1 launch. Our Lindsay Reiser is standing by, but let's go straight to space and aviation correspondent Tom Costello.
We are down to T-minus 45 seconds here, Melissa. We have hoped that we could lift off at 1:04 a.m. Eastern time, but a leak problem, don't believe it or not, an internet problem, delayed the process. That is all now working. They are right now about to go ahead and go into the final countdown. We're going to listen to the voice of Mission Control as we now approach the final few seconds of this. The bottom line, this is an uncrewed mission. NASA's return to the moon, an orbital mission around the moon for 26 days. If it all goes well, then humans will be on the next flight, the test flight around the moon, and then landing on the moon. Let's listen to Mission Control.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. Four-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
Engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops in Mission Control. The 4 core stage engines are throttling down ahead of passing through max Q. Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter. Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15-foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated.
And so far, this is going absolutely perfectly as Artemis lifts off. This is, of course, their third attempt to lift off. They tried to go in August, but they had a problem with a fuel leak. Then they had first it was a sensor problem, then a fuel leak in August. Then we had 2 hurricanes that rolled through. So this is now the fourth, you might say, the fourth actual scheduled time that they're actually lifting off, and it went off absolutely perfectly today as they travel at 17,000 miles per hour, eventually putting themselves into an orbit around the Earth. And then you will see Orion take off for what they call translunar injection on its way to the moon and this 26-day orbital mission around the moon. NBC's hello. How are you?
Hey, Tom. Well, wow, what an incredible moment here to be out here with you. Lit up the night sky. There was applause here. And I can tell you, we were both here about 6 weeks ago for the Falcon 9 liftoff. This is 5 times more powerful, and you can absolutely feel it. So Falcon 9 can generate 1.7 million pounds of thrust. This SLS, 8.8 million pounds, and it just takes you aback. It is just such a sight to see the sounds that you hear, and just really the people here to get a chance to be a part of it. You know, driving here to the space complex, you see people lining the streets just for that chance to be able to catch history.
Yeah, absolutely. NBC's Lindsay Reiser, sorry about that. It also took my my momentary brain glitch as you watch this phenomenal rocket taking off. You know, I have been here for years of shuttle missions, for SpaceX missions. This felt bigger. Car alarms were going off here, and the plume, if you will, the rocket plume, the orange fire underneath it, bigger than anything we've ever seen before. And they say, in fact, this is the most powerful rocket ever built by NASA.
The experience is bigger. The anticipation is bigger. This is really symbolic of a new era in space exploration. When we think about the things that we can do moving forward, getting a new generation excited about all this, you see parents bringing their kids to see this, witness history today. And right now, Tom, even as we're watching now, we can still see that bright light in the sky as Orion continues its trajectory. Has the core stage dropped yet?
No, we expect that. The main engine cutoff will be, we believe, at about 8 minutes and 30 seconds or so into this flight. And that will be a key indicator. We should keep listening to Mission Control as we go here. But so far, this is going absolutely perfectly. On a beautiful, clear night here, which we can see the moon perfectly clearly this morning, it is exactly as NASA had hoped. Now, we should make the point. Each one of these launches cost the country $4 billion. It's an awful lot of money to spend to go back to the moon. The issue, of course, is it worth it? In the view of NASA, it is worth it because it's setting the stage to go on to Mars.
Right. This unmanned mission is a fact-finding mission. They're going to be doing a ton of science experiments here. There's mannequins on board wearing radiation vests. There are sensors testing vibration and acceleration, eventually to be able to outfit the Orion space capsule with humans and bring the first female and the first person of color to the moon. Eventually, Tom, to colonize the moon and eventually to go to Mars. And of course, you ask some space geeks, some have their doubts about how lofty those goals are, but this is absolutely an incredible step in the right direction.
Last time humans were on the moon, 1972, December 1972, so nearly 50 years ago, next month, and this will now be the first time that humans have eventually will go back to orbit the moon on the next mission in 2024, and then landing on the moon in 2024 or 25, best case scenario. I think it could be actually later than that. But this is a critical test flight because they're testing not only the Artemis rocket stack, they're testing Orion to see how it performs orbiting the moon. And as you suggested, the mannequins on board are going to be essentially giving real data to the engineers to know exactly what the G-forces will be, the radiation will be on future humans who might be on board. And they need to test the re-entry shield on the bottom of that spacecraft to know that it will handle 5,000 degrees on re-entry and that they will safely land back in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, and then naval ships will come and collect the space capsule. But, you know, we've mentioned some of the mannequins on board. There are 10 CubeSats on board SLS right now. They're going to be deployed. And we know that one of them is going to be testing the effect of radiation on yeast cells. Another is going to look for water and ice around the moon, close to the moon, about 62 miles away. Another is actually going to unfurl its own solar panels, propel itself toward a small asteroid to be able to study resources there. So they are packing so much into this one mission.
CubeSats, literally, because they're tiny satellites in the shape of a cube, almost like a microwave, if you will, or maybe not even that big.
Yeah, size of a shoebox,
But they are dropping them off, and then they will conduct these experiments as Orion heads on back to the moon on its own mission.
Yeah, and we already know that there's a group of astronauts that have already been selected for this possible Artemis 2 mission that are sort of waiting in the wings, of course, eagerly awaiting all of this. And you know, Tom, this feels so big and different because sending humans into space is exciting. I mean, when we were here for Falcon 9, they sent a team up to the International Space Station. There's just a different energy as opposed to just a payload.
Well, I'm going to date myself, and I'll tell you that one of my earliest memories as a child was my father waking me up as Apollo 11 astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. And he shook me, as I was 5 years old or so, and he said, "Don't forget this moment." No idea, of course, that we would eventually have videotape and DVR, and we could watch it all as many times as we would like. But it has stuck in my head forever since then, and now America is, in fact, going to be returning to the moon. Again, this is an unmanned or an uncrewed mission, and we say that because, of course, the next crew, the next crew that will land on the moon will be made up of at least one woman and at least one person of color. And 50 years ago, it was all white men. So this is a team. There are 42 astronauts right now at NASA that could be among those to be selected. And this is a far more diverse astronaut corps than ever before.
I mean, and Tom, you've done so much reporting on this new space race that we're in with China, Russia becoming less of a player. But for example, China, they have rovers on the far side of the moon. This is going to the far side of the moon. In the past, Bill Nelson has said he wants to know what China's up to.
I just interviewed Bill Nelson a short time ago. It will be on the Today Show in the morning. But Bill Nelson said, make no mistake about it, Russia is no longer our chief competitor as it relates to space. It's China. And he was very candid that he doesn't trust China right now because China's not being forthcoming about what its goals are, what its hopes are for the moon. And his view, Bill Nelson's view, the administrator of NASA, is that China could decide that they're going to stake a claim maybe where the water is in the frozen ice on the south pole of the moon. If China gets there first and potentially locks out Western countries, that could be a problem.
Yeah, that South Pole is exactly where they want to build a lunar base. Americans, that is.
Because there's water there to drink and to fuel your rocket to eventually maybe go on to Mars.
Yeah.
A spectacular night here at the Kennedy Space Center. Morning here. NBC's Lindsay Reiser and myself, and a phenomenal day for NASA as Artemis is now well on its way to the moon. Melissa, back to you.
Oh, I have been lucky enough to see a couple of those in person myself, and exciting is the word. Tom and Lindsay, thank you so much. We now return back to our regular program in progress.
That is tonight's last word. The 11th hour with Stephanie Ruhle starts now.
Tonight, an emergency meeting of world leaders after Poland says a Russian-made missile killed 2 people there in a potentially major escalation. Then, despite big midterm losses, Donald Trump officially throws his red hat into the 2024 ring as Republicans publicly battle it out for their leadership. And could Twitter be down to its final 280 characters as more advertisers run from Elon Musk? The big question is, can the site even stay online as the 11th hour gets underway on this Tuesday night? Good evening once again. I'm Stephanie Ruhle in Washington on what has turned out to be a very busy Tuesday night. The Biden White House now facing what may be